We use king oyster mushroom and shiitake mushroom, and leeks, and cilantro, yeah, and a little bit of the jicama for the crunch. My name is Yen Do. Yeah, I started the restaurant business since 1987, and Patrick was born in 1988, and I take care of the 2 kids and running the restaurant. Since then, until today, I still running 3 restaurants. When Pat was young, he liked to come out to help with the family restaurant. And sometimes he helped me with the menu. Every time he eats something and he tried to know what's inside, what is the ingredient to make that.
Growing up, I saw how hard my mom and dad worked at the industry and how tough it was and how unrelenting it can be. And I, kind of spent the early part of my 20s doing everything I could to stay away from that. And so when I was 21, I packed up my life and I moved to LA, and I lived there for 4 years off and on and pursued writing. I've always considered myself a storyteller, and I think for me, writing was the one medium where it was just kind of pure creation, right? There was no boundaries and limits placed on anything. You didn't have to worry about budget, you didn't have to worry about equipment or any sort of methods that you were out of reach. And so for me, I just really enjoyed the act of pure creation. And I think that's kind of the approach I try to take with cooking as well.
I got into the food and beverage industry 100% in part of this guy right here, Pat Do. We've known each other since high school. We hung out a couple of times in LA, and then he moved back to Vancouver when he opened up Do Chay. I remember him telling me about it, and I was vegetarian. He was not. It was very exciting for me, but I didn't know how exciting it was until I actually came and ate, and then my life changed, right? It became my favorite restaurant in the world.
I kind of grew up in the kitchen. I know a lot of people say that, but for me, that was kind of my truth. I loved being at the restaurant. I loved kind of being around my, because it meant being around my parents. They just would put me in a box when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then the servers and stuff would come and check in on me, and it was all my uncles and
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And sometimes my brother put him in the sack in the back, and they're washing dishes. At first, I didn't want him to go into restaurant business. Yeah, when he told me that, then I kind of shocked.
I never went to culinary school. Everything I learned and all my education and every recipe that I know comes from my mom. She was the one who taught me everything. And all of her dishes, she made an effort to pass down to me. I remember when I first started in the kitchen, she would pull me aside and show me how to do a dish. And of course, me being oh, I was raised in the kitchen, I know all this stuff. I never wanted to pay attention, but it was when I started working in the kitchen, I started realizing how much went into prep, how much time went into actually even something as simple as fish sauce. What you need to do in order to balance that flavor and get it exactly right every single time. How much knowledge you need to have where you can just pull something it's a pinch of salt. What is a pinch of salt? How do you know that? And it's only by doing it that you can kind of learn those things. And I think that was kind of the big lesson in the early days that she really taught me and drilled home. I've always been someone who has struggled with the idea of community. I really didn't identify as Asian at all for probably the first 23 years of my life. I remember a lot of times I really didn't feel any sense of connection to being Vietnamese. And a lot of that was because when I was a kid, I was a lot bigger. And I was 5'11" when I was 15, and you know, obviously for Vietnamese Asian, like we tend to be smaller, on the smaller side, and so like people kind of like Vietnamese people would always just like look at me like I was strange. I don't know, it's a Vietnamese saying that they say, like he must have drank elephant milk a lot, when you fed him elephant milk when he was a baby and now he's a giant. And so that always made me feel like really self-conscious about that thing. The people who came to our restaurant when I was a kid and like, you know, would speak to me in Vietnamese and stuff like that, oh, that was the community. Like I actually was part of that, you know, like the fact that they felt, you know, they felt emboldened enough to like kind of insult me in that way and like kind of make fun of me. I started to miss that, right? Because I felt different in another way when I was in LA. And so I think coming back, I really tried to embrace the Vietnamese side of my culture. I really tried to like find my roots and find kind of what makes me tick as like a Vietnamese Canadian. And I think the thing that I've discovered, it's somewhere in between. You know, you're not just Vietnamese, you're not just Canadian, right? You're a little bit of everything, and you're a product of all of those things, and I try to take that with me into my cooking too. When I moved back to Vancouver to open a restaurant, the first restaurant I opened, it was actually here. It was called House Special. You know, it was a meat restaurant. I remember it was my birthday, and we had this event coming up the next day. So I had to be in the kitchen at midnight. And because we were waiting for a shipment of quail to come in, because that was on the menu. And so the box of quail comes in, I open it up, and it's like just 80 quail carcasses. And it's midnight, it's my birthday, and I start deboning this quail, and I'm just thinking to myself, wow, I'm not happy doing this. And I cut my finger on the quail. And that was the moment where I just like kind of made the decision that I just didn't want to like serve meat anymore. I didn't want to cook, break down proteins. Like I just wanted to do something that I just never felt like I didn't feel bad about. And that was really the genesis of Do Chay at that point. It's very intentional that like we didn't write like that it was a vegetarian or a Vietnamese restaurant, because I wanted the place to just be a restaurant. My mother's approach to food was that it was always about making people happy. Like the recipes were always about making people happy. And it was never about money, or it was never about cost. And so like I really, really tried hard to like take that lesson that she gave me and kind of put it into the ethos of the restaurant.
I think Pat is a visionary. The reason why I work with Pat is because I trust that he is just so damn good at what he does that I want to be a part of it. Like whether it be in food, whether it be in storytelling, I just like everything that I've seen him touch and do has been so like just good.
When we first opened Do Chay, I was talking to our publicist, and she was like, what is your goal with this restaurant? Like, do you want to be the best vegetarian restaurant in the city? And I was like, I would rather be the best restaurant in the city and the best Vietnamese restaurant, and I would trade all of that in to be the best Vietnamese restaurant in the city. And at that point, I was trying to be really proud about like, you know, Vietnamese heritage, and I just wanted to be the best. So she said to me, she's like, that's a great goal, and I love it for you, but I promise you right now, you will never be considered for the best Vietnamese restaurant in Vancouver, because once they lump you in as a vegetarian restaurant, you will be nothing else. You won't even be considered for the Vietnamese like category. And I was like, okay, all right, no problem, like that's fine. And I just kind of like let the thought out of my head. The Vancouver Magazine Awards that came out at the end of that year for the first year. And we were nominated for 3 awards, and we won 2 of them. And the ones we won were Best Vegetarian and Best New Restaurant. And the one that we were nominated for, which we ranked 3rd in, is the one I'm most proud of, and that was Best Vietnamese. And that was like really the moment where I was like, oh, like I think I've arrived as like a Vietnamese cook. And yeah, I like honestly, I like, you know, that award came in a piece of paper. The other 2 were plaques, and I would trade those 2 for the piece of paper that says we're the 3rd best Vietnamese restaurant in the city of that year, because like that was the goal that I didn't think was possible. And you know, like the community embraced it, like Vietnamese people embraced it, and yeah, it was just one of those things that like actually like I've never experienced like a community coming together in that way before. Everything that I've done up until now has always been for myself. It was an entry into a Vietnamese community that I had recently, like I had up until that point, thought was completely hostile towards me. And so like seeing that, like that was honestly, like I think anything else I do in my life from here on out, getting third place, third best Vietnamese restaurant in the city, not even winning, that is the proudest accomplishment in my life.
I'm very grateful to see how he succeeded and very proud of him. I want to see him success in what he's doing and he loves to do.
If you're a young chef out there and you're trying to get started and you love cooking, I would say the best thing you can do is stick with it, because you know the industry is in a really, really interesting place right now, and a lot of people are leaving it, and people don't want to do this job anymore because it, you know, they feel like it's hard, hot, old-fashioned, sweaty. You know, it doesn't pay well, and yeah, all of those are true. Yeah, all of those things are true. But like, if you have a calling and you believe that you really want to tell that story and the story of cooking, then I think you owe it to yourself to pursue that, and you owe it to yourself to try as best you can. And that's, you know, that's kind of what we try to do here. I don't think that I've made it. Like I don't think that, like, you know, the story is finished being told, because like I think if you make it, that's, you know, the end of your story. I have a kid on the way, and so I think, you know, for me, the lessons that I want to pass down to them is just the lessons that were passed down to me. I want them to grow up knowing that, you know, if you work hard and you put a lot of effort into life, then life will give you a lot back. I feel content, but I don't feel like I've accomplished everything that I want to do. I'm hopeful that, you know, down the line, you know, I can pass something really significant down to the next generation, and that's really all I want to do. I'm Patrick Do. I'm just trying to make it while making a difference.